of it telling that let me give this keynote based on like my previous experience and for the last 13 years, what it has been and what has my mindset been. Like previously, I was in a different organization, and that organization, I was just a performance tester, right? And performance testing, like I don't have to worry about the tool or the bigger picture of it, like what are the requirements or what the tool is going to perform when it's in production and other things. So my job was to go inside, run the performance test, check out the reports, whether something is working fine or not, like just report it. And if something is wrong and if I figure out a bottleneck, I'll be happy about it, right? And that's how it has been. Now, from that point of time, there's like a slight, when I joined ThoughtWorks, there's like a slight deviation from that the mindset of trying to figure out defects and other things. Now, I can call it like QA mindset, or if I face any issues or if I come across like a crossroad or something, this has been my guiding principles, like when I do. It might not be like in the proper order of chronologically how it happened or how I got mature in these things, but these are the most important things. The next thing I really want to call out is these are not something which I'm like really good at. These are something which I still want to follow and I still want to do and I try to use it in my everyday. So that's the idea of it. Like let's try to start. Yeah. So the very first thing, right? I spoke about the fact, right? Like in my previous organization, when there's a defect which is coming in, I would be happy about it. But now the mindset has changed as like more than finding on defect, it's more important to not find a defect. So that's the entire idea, right? So as Alan Page says is, if you want to be serious about quality, it is time to get tired of finding bugs and start preventing their happening in the first place. So I put it as like in two formats. So one is defect prevention itself. Like there's like various things which we can do, right? I'm not going into the intricacies of this. I'm like trying to give you an example of those things. So one is with TDD, which is the test-driven development. For example, when the developers write the code, what they will do is that they will start off with writing the unit test, right? So even before writing the very first thing, very first piece of code which works, they will start off with a unit test. So the unit test will obviously fail, right? Because there's no code at the beginning. And for the test to pass, they will write a code which defines a certain functionality or defines a certain requirement which the client has set. And it won't be anything outside of it. It will be the very basic minimum which satisfies the client's need, right? It might be very basic or the very first high priority scenario which you're writing. Now, after writing it, you'll ensure whether the test has passed. Now, if you think about Agile is based, the key factor of Agile is one is increment, right? Now, after writing that particular piece of code, you start incrementing, you start adding something to it. And every time you add something to it, you add a test. So that's how it is. You start with a test, you write the functionality, you make it pass, and then you again add another test. So now when the code is developed, you already have a test, right? There's a basic test. There's no UI automation or anything. There's no API automation or anything, but you have some kind of test. Now, while writing itself, you can tell that there's defect prevention, which has already happened. The next thing is CI. I just want to go this example because the idea of CI is that consider you folks are working in modules or teams or whatever, and the code bases are at different locations. You're checking in at different point of times. During CI, what will happen is that it's called continuous integration, obviously. Continuously, your code will be integrated with some other code. It's not like you will wait for like say release or you'll wait for like 1 or 2 weeks or something and think about I'm integrating my particular code with my neighbor's code or my friend's code or whatever, and there might be defect. It might not happen that way. You write a code after coming to a logical conclusion, maybe be it a day or be it half a day or whatever, you check in, right? And then you check in, the integration happens, and then and there you'll see that okay, something has integrated or some error has happened or everything has worked on fine. So you are preventing defect. Like these are two main examples for it. The next thing is shift left. So I think many would have heard, right? It's like a concept which has been flying around for quite some time. By shift left, what I mean is that the phases of software lifecycle, right? Like starting from requirements, analysis, and development, testing, and then deployment or release or whatever. So traditionally, the testers are testing as such will happen only in the testing phase. But moving away from that, what will happen is that we are thinking about testing or we are thinking about quality right from the beginning. So we are shifting left from each and every step. Like even before testing and development we are doing, TDD is one example. Sorry for using the same thing again, but it makes sense a lot over here. So TDD is one such example. And other thing is that even in analysis front, working with BAs and QAs and ensuring whether the acceptance criteria or the designs, does it fall in place? Or, I mean, even the BAs and QAs will think from that point of view, but as a QA, you can ensure that whether things are, in place. And is the requirements matching what exactly an end user might need? And you can be the quality inspector for it. So now moving on, after built-in quality, what will happen is that consider you are coming from a traditional background, right? As I was telling that in my previous company, I was just worried about the testing phase. Now, when I want to go like one step above, like helping out the developer or sitting with the developer or helping out the BA, and thinking about acceptance criteria, the one thing which strikes my mind was I'm doing something new. Now the fear is of failure. Now let me take an analogy here, right? So you see the kid is going and he's falling. I hope it's a he, that's why I'm saying that. The kid is falling, and again the kid is racing back, and then he's falling again. Like, and I'm reading a book these days, and I can't tell the name as such. So it says Subtle Art of Not Giving Up, and then the F word, right? It's the book by Mark Manson. He says about the failures and other things. So what he actually tells in the book is that during those days when we were kids, right, we don't even think about a failure. Like it's nothing to us, right? At that point of time when we fall, we just get up and then we move forward. Now in this particular point of age with the social media and other things, like we think about failure as something which is like out of blue or an artificial thing. But that has to be eliminated. So whenever you're trying something new, you have to take a leap of faith, like be it a new tool or be it a new technology. When you're trying to something completely new, at very first time, maybe people will look into it a different way. But if you have the faith on what you're doing, I think you can propose it. The next thing is that embracing failure, right? So you did something, it went wrong, I think it's fine, right? Everybody would have gone across failures. Like during college days I failed in exams, but like it hasn't stopped me. I think everybody at some point of time during learning cycle or whatever, right, we would have attained failure. So failure is a part of life, it's natural, and it makes sense to like just move on. So yeah, so after failing fast, what the next thing, other thing is that there are certain point in time when the technology was shifting to, I mean, the shift left was being introduced, right? Now we are talking about testing used in other phases also, right? Now what it means is that it's the entire team's responsibility for having a quality product. So if you think about a blame game or something fails in the production or some defects appears, typically it will come to a QA set or tester set or whatever, right? Now I think we can move away from that, and then we can say that like the entire team is responsible for it, because we are baking in quality. Like TDD is like one example, but if you think about agile, maybe there might be a session in future where we'll talk about what is the life cycle of a story, or what processes do we follow as a team to deliver right product. There are stages and there are rituals which happens where we ensure that at every stage, from either be it analysis or either be it requirements or whatever, like something around testing happens. Like I can give you an example that even before a person, even before a developer takes a story for, takes a feature for development, there'll be like one venue where the developer and then the QA and then the BA and sometimes the TO, they all come into the picture, and then they will read the requirements. They will read the acceptance criteria, and then they see that is this specifications right? Is this something which actually the end user needs? And maybe the QA can suggest that like few scenarios are missing. You didn't think about a certain, maybe it's a mobile website or a mobile application or whatever. Maybe as a QA, you can suggest that you didn't think about a certain mobile device, and this particular thing might not work in that particular device. You might need to add one more task. Or as a QA, you can suggest that these are my data. I'll be testing with those kind of data. Like you can also test as a developer when you're developing it, things like that. So that is the idea behind it. So it's a team responsibility. Every role tests it, and I think there's a famous saying even by Bill Gates that 100% of the time the tester tests, but 50% of time even the developers they test. So it's basically a testing organization is what he would claim. But I didn't add it over here. So the next thing is that every role tests it, but you are the person who is the inspector of quality. So you are the person who will be responsible. You are the person who will tell that like something has to be done or should hold the fort and something similar. Like you will be the person who will think about is my coverage right and things like that. And calling out any discrepancies. Like for example, if you see that like that's a feature with, there is no unit testing or whatever, maybe you will be the person who is calling about it. But one call out is that again the leap of faith should be taken here. Like traditionally, you might have been only seeing the testing or only working with WebDriver or whatever, but you have to take a leap of faith and see into the other things also and ensure that everything's working fine. Maybe you might not get it the very first time, but when you start doing it, you will ensure that everything else is also falling in the picture. So after team responsibility, the other thing which is like most important in the current period of time is communication and collaboration. So I think that's like the famous saying, right? The kinds of errors that cause plane crashes are invariably errors of teamwork and communication, right? Like if something goes wrong, it most probably was because of some kind of communication error. And what I'm trying to tell you is that collaboration, communication over depending on process and tool. So traditionally, what will happen, and in this particular time frame, which is the COVID and where everybody is working from home, for us to get assigned to a task or for us to like pick up a story or pick up a feature and then test it, we'll probably wait for some kind of tool notification or some kind of process to happen. For example, we may be free now and we might wait until say next day for some stand up to happen or some meeting to happen where we might be assigned, or we might be waiting for a notification from some tool, for example say Jira or like any other tool, for some task to be assigned to us. So I think these are all something which is the tool helps a lot, but the tool in this case is also like a limitation where it makes us wait for some kind of time. So in this particular state, it's always good to reach out, right? So the other thing is that while we are dealing with tools and while we are dealing with chat and other things, what we speak and what we feel might be completely different, right? So it's actually very good to call up the person and overcome it and do those things. So this has helped a lot, in my lot of projects previously. The other thing is most important is collaborative decision. So you see a difference, like owning a task rather than a task assigned. So you don't want to be the person who is just at the receiving end. So you don't want to be the person who takes up task just because that you are assigned to something, right? And the ownership which you will have for the task, or the closeness to heart that you'll have for this task will be like really less. So rather, I think as a collaborative effort, you should pick up a task. Like every meeting or every decision, like for example, picking of a tool, or it might be like in some cases we have seen this, right? Like a release is set even without asking the QA team. Like a release or a deadline is set by top management, and you might not even understand like why a certain deadline is set. The only thing you will probably understand is you have to complete the testing or whatever. Now in those kind of examples, I think a decision which is done as a team, like you own it, like you tell that okay, you might not know, right? The clients might have like some kind of deadlines, and for example like a holiday season is coming and the retail website has to be released by then. This is something which you might not understand if the task is directly given to you. But when a decision is happening within a team, at that point of time, you'll actually understand that okay, like this is the reason why the deadline is like so stringent or something. Or that might be the place where you decide and tell that okay, we can't do it in such a way and it doesn't make sense. Can we shift it by some days, or can we have like some features less in this particular release? So basically, it's a decision by the entire team. So the next important thing is problem solving. So while we may understand the problem, it is critical for us to change our thinking, our practices, and continuously evolve to stay ahead of the problems we face. So the one important thing here, right? Like when somebody comes to us with a, I think we might have faced when we are in a consulting environment, right? We might not face this definitely when a task is assigned to us, but in a consulting environment, you are put in a position where a client talks about a problem. But it's very important for you to not think in terms of solutions. Like you might have worked on something, you might have used like WebDriver for a certain set of certain kind of application. But when the problem is said, you don't directly think that okay, WebDriver will work. It's usually shouldn't be that way. Like so, don't think solution. Don't jump to conclusions. Okay. The other thing is that you might not have still understood the entire story of the person who's dealing with the problem. The other thing is that when you are like directly giving a solution, even without a lot of thought process, what you're doing is that you are just treating the symptoms and you're not thinking about the underlying cause. And very related is understand the problem. So listen to the entire story. It's like mostly the opposite of what I put above. Listen to the entire story and wear those shoes. Like be in the other person's shoes and try to understand the problem. Have empathy and sympathy towards the person and try to figure out the disease. The other thing is that it might even happen that that person doesn't have any problem at all. They are not. They might not be thinking. I mean, they might not be suffering from a problem as severe as they were initially thinking. So next thing, I think this is like very, I wouldn't say very recent, but the trend is like moving a lot in this particular period of time, right? The bitterness of poor quality remains long after the sweetness of low price is forgotten. So what the idea here is that, so, okay, so this is wrong. So I wanted to put deployable software versus new features. So consider you are a QA in the team, and the team thinks about adding a lot of features. Or like everybody has their own agenda, right? I'm not telling whose agenda is wrong or right, but consider your team is like doing a lot of sign up for like new features or stories. But as a QA, you know that you might not be able to test it, or it's like not you might not be able to test it. Like it's not possible by the entire team to deliver all those features in like the quality which is demanded, right? And if you try to shrink everything within a smaller window, it might happen that few defects might escape, right? So at that point of time, deployable software is like really important. I think at that point of time, you should probably keep your foot down and tell that like these many features can't be done by the team, and whatever is being done until now has to be delivered with the right quality. So high quality software is important. So like strong adherence to testing parameter. Like there might be cases where a certain kind of testing might take some time. For example, adding a automation suite for API testing might take some time, and we might tell that let's not add it now because there's not enough time. But I think you have to keep your foot down as a QA and then tell that like it has to follow these things for us to ensure that you have a quality product at the end. And same thing with practices and feedback loops. The next thing is that solid release pipeline. So by having a solid release pipeline or a CI, you will we spoke about CI earlier. You'll ensure that your code is like already like production ready. The only thing is like deployment and a stable deployment method, like whichever new environment you create, or if you're rolling out to a new client or anything, you need to have a stable deployment method, like one-click deployment, which usually it's a like very famous word. I think the stable deployment methods and continuous integration is very necessary. So the last and final thing in this uh, thing is value based in my path are the guiding principles. The thing about value is right, it's like a very cliche thing. Like everybody will probably tell you that you have to depend on value and other things. but it might happen that we all try to avoid it at some point of time because it's like little difficult. For example, even moving in traffic, if we find a lot of crowd in our way, we may jump to the wrong side and move. Like, I'm not telling on a very general basis, but here again in the same book which I showed you, there's like one other instance where the author tells that you have to measure success not in a rudimentary or a numbers based, and it should be based on like some kind of value. For example, your team's value can be that my entire North America should use my system, rather than like 10,000 users should use, which is a rudimentary number, and you might not know what to do after you achieve the 10,000, right? So the value should be like the entire America should use it or something like that. Or your personal value should be I should be honest at all point of time. Like again, it's a very cliche thing, but it's like very difficult to follow and it will give you a lot of sense. So I think as a again with the collaboration, other things, as a core team, you can get down the values of what your team should do. Like in case of a discrepancy as to whether you should go on this side or the other side, maybe you have defining principles or defining values for your team. The other point which I want to close off with, the numbers still do help, right? Numbers is really important from a point of view of estimations, or how many stories or features you pick for a certain period of time, and thinking about roadmaps, like in another 10 months what will I do, and definitely the cost. So I will probably leave it at that, and I hope it was helpful. And thanks for the opportunity. We have like some very interesting talks lined up, and I'm very excited to go through this. Like, over to you, Mohan.
Thank you, Jaya. Thank you so much. Definitely, I hope it will be helpful for all of us. Okay, then, so we can start with the first session. So this session is going to be about, you might have seen the agenda, role of WinApp driver. So we have Ilango with us. So so for this session, I will help you to understand about what is WinApp driver and how can it be implemented in our project, those things. And at the end of each session, we will be having a poll. So just 3 questions it will be having, just to get the feedback, so that it will definitely helpful for us to prepare upcoming ODCA events. So please take your time at the end of the session. So now I will give it to Ilambo for the session.
And before that, so if you have any Q&As that needs to be answered, so kindly post it in the Q&A. We will take it up at the end of